Hi Myra, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. I'm super excited to be talking to a Stanford alum. I think there's a lot of interesting insights that could be relevant not only for Stanford students, but more broadly people who are interested in the AI space, particularly the angle that you and your team are tackling it from, which is AI interpretability. But before we get into all of that, it's great to have a little bit of fun, and we're going to play a short icebreaker. I'm just going to ask you random questions, and you'll just answer the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
So the first question is, if you could use AI to solve one quirky, everyday annoyance, what would it be?
This isn't a quirky annoyance, but it's definitely an annoyance, which is shopping for me is still not super well solved when I have something very specific that I need in my closet. And I've tried deep research, I've tried O3, I've tried everything, and it's still not quite there yet. So I would love for AI to solve
So
that
I
for
guess
me.
all these shopping AI agents will be some
Yeah,
of your favorites.
yeah, exactly.
And then what's one book that's profoundly shaped your thinking or inspired your approach at Goodfire?
It's a great question. I don't read a ton of books on AI and technology because I try to read books in my free time that are very different than what I do day to day. But one book that I did read while I was at GSB was The Alignment Problem, which I think is a pretty good introduction for folks who are not as familiar with some of the challenges in working with really powerful modern AI systems and some of the gaps that we have in really understanding and controlling these systems.
Yeah.
And reading that book, I think, just reaffirmed that this is something I really wanted to work on. And
Yeah.
interpretability is just like the one way that I decided that I wanted to make an impact.
Are you more into fiction books in your spare
Yeah,
time?
yeah,
Okay, okay.
yeah.
And then lastly, if you had to pick a theme song that captures your startup journey to date, what would that song be?
Oh man. Um, I don't have a specific song, but it would probably be one of those like six-part symphonies where it's like every day is a little different and there's moments of chaos and calm and but yeah, it's super fun. I understand why people who join startups never want to leave just because it is
Yeah,
really,
there's
really
always
exciting.
something new every single
Yeah.
day. No,
Yeah.
thank you so much for that. So to begin this conversation, we're just going to rewind to the beginning. You had this incredibly rigorous background, you're a Stanford CS MBA, you did quant research at Two Sigma, so you come from a very like technical landscape. And then you walk straight into one of the most intellectually brutal problems in AI, which is interpretability. So, what was that moment for you that clicked when you realized this is the problem that you want to be solving for the next decade or so? And why is it so
Um,
important to you?
yeah, it's a great question. I think that there wasn't one moment. It was really just a series of um, moments over time. So I had always known that I wanted to understand how models worked. And I actually started approaching this problem from the early days of machine learning. So smaller, more task specific models, nothing like GPT or, you know, the models that we're seeing today. But even at the time, this was like 2019 when I started working on ML in earnest, and there are a lot of problems with these models, such as gender bias or just generally bias towards certain populations that weren't well represented in the training data. And to me, this seemed like a pretty simple problem, something that we should be able to solve somehow. But as I like dug into the research and tried to understand what were the best methods of solving it, um, everything still seemed constrained to like fixing the input data or fixing basically fixing things at the input output layer, and nothing was really like systematically changing the weights of the model or changing the algorithms of the model to solve these fundamental issues. And when ChatGPT came out and these generative huge pre-trained models came out, it became more clear that these models were increasingly powerful, going to be used in more and more use cases, and again had all of these problems that we couldn't solve. And again, like maybe you can change the data, but these models are trained on huge amounts of data. So how do you actually pinpoint where to go, and how do you actually fix that data? It wasn't clear. And again, we didn't know how these models actually worked, and not even the researchers who develop these models or the engineers who work on these models day to day can actually understand their inner minds. So that was like always kind of bugging me for a lot of reasons. Like there are a lot of unintended side effects that I thought that could be resolved if we solved this bigger fundamental question. But like you said, it is a huge unsolved problem. It is a really hard problem to solve. Why did
Yeah.
I decide to work on it for my career? And I think, something I learned at GSB was kind of to follow where your energy and passion is. And I just couldn't stop thinking about this problem, and I kept going to books and to papers and to people who were working on these things. And at one point, I was like considering other startups or companies I could join, and my partner was like, "Why don't you just go work on this thing that you
Yeah.
keep talking about and that you keep reading about and that you like love to think about all the time?" And I was like, "Okay, maybe you're right." So
That makes sense.
that's kind of what I decided officially.
Yeah. It's crazy thinking about it because I like one of these random analogies around if a doctor gave you, sort of diagnosis, but they couldn't tell how they arrived at it. They just knew that it's quite accurate and how
Mhm.
scary that is. And it almost seems like interpretability is like a no-brainer now.
Mhm.
Like, of course, people should be able to like unpack the different elements and be able to shed light on how a model arrived at the different answers. But could you talk a little bit about why this wasn't possible in, say, 2015, and what has changed in sort of, the technology or just the ecosystem more broadly that allows for this to be a not something just like an academic niche, but something that
Mhm.
can be like a enterprise grade platform or software?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'll say like in the last 2 or 3 years, there's been a really promising burst of interpretability research led by labs at OpenAI, DeepMind, and Anthropic. And I think the core unlock here was actually understanding how to scale some of the earlier techniques that people had been experimenting with to really large models, and also finding techniques that work in a completely unsupervised way on large amounts of data. So I'll actually start with the latter. So before a couple years ago, it was really hard to disentangle all of the different things that a model has learned under the hood. So neural networks are this giant mass of nodes and weights and parameters, and to most people just looks like a huge jumble of numbers. But we know that they are learning important, concepts, just like a human mind encodes concepts about like names and places and things like that. Um, but there wasn't a really good way to basically extract all of those concepts that the model had learned in a disentangled representative fashion. And some of the early work was basically building a separate machine learning model that could be trained on your target model that you were trying to interpret and pull out all of those concepts in a completely unsupervised way. So by unsupervised, that means like nothing is manual, that you don't need any labels, you don't need anything, you just have this model, you have another model trained on it, and it pulls out all of the representative concepts. And that was a really big breakthrough because it showed that it was actually possible to recover meaningful information from the model, and it's not just this huge bundle that is uninterpretable to humans. And then Anthropic also did a lot of work to scale those approaches to big language models. So Claude, I think they did it on their Claude Sonnet 3.5 model, and showed that these things just worked when you applied them to bigger models and weren't just confined to like small toy model use cases. So that's like where we are right now. I think there's a lot more work to be done, and a lot of what we do at Goodfire is trying to push forward the research to make it even more accurate and even more explanatory. And yeah, there's a lot to be done, but we're excited and super well positioned to be making theoretical progress on this front and also partnering with a lot of the other labs as well to do so.
And then, when you say like mechanistic interpretability, like what exactly are we talking about? I think, to a lot of people, even within tech, it sounds quite abstract. So could you walk us through like what exactly happens inside a model and how Ember starts to make sense of all the different components?
Yeah. So mechanistic interpretability is a term that distinguishes itself from just interpretability and explainability as a broader field, um, where mechanistic interpretability is really focused on understanding the internals of the model. So think of it as like neuroscience for AI models. You really want to understand, like I said, all of the internal concepts that the model has learned and also how they relate to each other, how the model uses different concepts together to arrive at a certain answer. And this is distinctly different from interpretability that is more focused on, for example, input-output evaluation. So you could have certain test cases that you write to elicit certain behaviors that you want to interpret in the model. And then you could just pass those test cases in input-output and see how your model performs. And that might still be interpretability because you understand you're testing or measuring some aspect of your model that you care about, or that might be explainability. And so mechanistic interpretability really distinguished itself as like doing this really seemingly impossible task of reverse engineering these models, which, as you might know, like are hundreds of billions of parameters in size, and only increasing given like the latest trends and updates with these scaling labs.
Are you able to give like a concrete example, whether in like the finance space, or healthcare space, or any industry, in terms of where Ember is embedded in sort of that decision making workflow and
Mm-hmm.
where it's most impactful in terms of how different potential users incorporate it into their day to day?
Yeah. I'll give a pretty simple example with one of our partnerships where um, essentially we are working with a company that's building financial chatbots. So this is, sorry, financial advice chatbots. So this is giving their users, yeah, information about, how they should think about investing or savings or just general financial questions. And one thing that Ember really helps us is they wanted to understand one, all of the concepts that their chatbot model had learned, and two, how to control explicitly for concepts that they wanted to basically steer on. So, for instance, they wanted to be able to make sure that the model never leaks personally identifiable information. So this is names, addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, things like that. And using our techniques, we were able to train an interpreter model on this chatbot model and find the features or the concepts in the model that encode information about personal information, so like names, emails, phone numbers, addresses. And then once those features were being fired or like activating, when a user gave the model some prompt, then we would block that part of the prompt from going through the model. And this helped them obviously build more secure applications, helped them adapt their model to something that they cared about by using the knowledge that the model had already learned about personal information. And you can imagine this extending to a lot of other use cases, and we're exploring with them as well if there are other things that they want to control for based on these features that are already in their model and they can control now.
That's interesting. And one other thing I'd like to touch on is, even as we look at sort of how AI is restructuring, I guess, like the internet economy, and, now it's no longer humans transacting, it's potentially agents transacting. We're seeing an emergence of new business models. Um, how do you think about the business model for such a very deep infrastructural product? Because
Yeah.
it's not necessarily like API calls or consumer AI. So how do you guys think about what that business model evolution might be, and can you overfit those to existing business models that you see within the software industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is very different. So for right now, I will say the stage of company we're at is we are investing in pretty high touch customer partnerships and engagements. Like you said, a lot of infrastructure build, a lot of custom model training. So very, very high touch. And the way we're thinking about pricing right now is similar to Palantir or these like services heavy industries where you charge large contracts and agree on some outcomes that you would like to see happen through this engagement. And so that's how we're pricing right now, which is obviously not at all like a traditional SaaS company,
Yeah.
but helps us really build out our infrastructure and accelerates our research by keeping in touch with real models out in production, having access to customer infrastructure and data um, through their channels. And that's how we're thinking about pricing now. I think things will obviously change, and we don't quite know what our end product will look like once we have solved some of the big research breakthroughs. It might be like a developer product, in which case it looks much more like traditional developer tooling pricing. It might be even more outcomes based, where if, for instance, we're partnering with bio customers and helping them discover new novel like scientific information that their models have learned. And in that case, you could also think of us as either being like a platform or like a experimental software that you charge for like normal SaaS products, or you could think of us as being much more embedded, charging on outcomes that we hope will happen based on being able to look inside the model and find new, like never before seen information. So the question is still it's still the answer is still unclear.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to see where things go. I think a lot of people, especially with agent type startups, are starting to think about outcomes based pricing. And I'm
Yeah.
sure we'll consider those things as the product evolves.
Yeah. Another thing that is still evolving is just a lot of the regulatory environment.
Hmm.
I think, in the US, in the EU, but particularly also other countries, they're still defining what that AI regulation might look like. Do you
Hmm.
believe that AI interpretability as a market as a whole is a compliance-driven product, or do you think that there will also be an increase in the number of stakeholders that want to make more informed decisions on AI? Like, which of those two factors do you think is a greater driver for the growth in the space?
Yeah, I generally don't believe that regulation can give you product market fit. And so we're very much operating in an environment where we're not depending on regulatory frameworks or certain, you know, rules to pass around how you can use AI models to build the company. And, there's a lot of reasons for that. I think regulation can change quite often. It can be super dependent on the administration and things like that. But also, we fundamentally believe that interpretability has a lot of value even outside of regulation and compliance. For instance, in the bio case I just mentioned, we're helping these huge healthcare institutions understand custom transformer models that help predict disease. And so in doing that, we can actually help them understand better, what should you be thinking about when you make a diagnosis? What has your model learned that maybe your doctors haven't learned when it comes to making a diagnosis on specific patient data? And so, like, that is fundamentally valuable in and of itself. And that's why we're also super excited about the scientific model space, because these models are really hard to understand. And when you interpret them, you actually get new, valuable information. And then in the enterprise case or in the language model case, I think we're thinking a lot about how you can just make model development and deployment just much better. Like, even amid today's environment in which there's not a ton of strict AI regulation in enterprise, we're still seeing a lot of companies come to us and be like, we still don't feel comfortable deploying our model on production because we don't know that we don't know what set of behaviors it might exhibit out in production. And that's where interpretability just has a really big role to help people feel confident and
Yeah.
secure in how their models are going to perform. And I think a lot of this is will be made even more urgent, and we'll have more and more people coming to us if regulation passes. But even without that, there's a lot of demand and need.
Yeah. Interpretability sounds quite technical. So, how's the team thinking about making these tools quite user friendly for people or businesses that might not have deep technical teams?
Yeah, it's still something we're thinking a lot about. As I mentioned, our partnerships right now are very like embedded approaches. So we'll be send our technical staff to work with the teams directly, and that has worked really well. But yeah, in thinking about actually building out a product or a platform that scales much more nicely, right now we are targeting a much more technical persona, which is engineers or researchers who actually work on training these models, adapting these models, and deploying them. And most enterprises have an ML engineering team to work on these types of projects. They might be very small teams, but still they'll have a few people working on this. And that is kind of who we're thinking about building for right now. Can they, when they work with their models, really understand what they're doing, what they've learned, any sort of edge cases or scenarios that they want to avoid? Can they use interpretability to superpower them as developers? And that's one angle. We're also trying to, as a company, because we are a little bit more like DeepMind or OpenAI early days, in which we are also kind of exploring and doing research and kind of making the public aware of something that they maybe didn't think was possible before.
Yeah.
On our brand and our social media strategy, we are thinking a little bit about how to make more people interested in interpretability, because we just generally think it's great for the field to have more people interested, to have students want to work in it, talented people want to come work on interpretability. So from that angle, we're thinking of releasing demos and papers and blog posts that are a bit more accessible to maybe people who aren't as technical, to understand like, oh, cool, this is like a really new way of working with AI models. And yeah, like this is really interesting, really cool. I want to learn more about it. Whoever you are and whatever technical background you might have.
Yeah. If we had to fast forward 5 years from now, what is your hope for where Goodfire and Ember, and I'm sure many other products that you guys would have released, what does that success look like, or the key milestones that you hope to have achieved at that point?
Yeah, I mean, there are many people who think in 5 years we'll have AGI and AI will run the world. If that's the case, then I really hope that what we have done as a company is the foundational research and application layer to control super intelligent AI, and make sure that it's
We really
aligned
need
with,
that.
yeah, make sure that it's aligned with what we as a society actually want from these systems. If not, then I think in 5 years, I really hope that again, like we've made huge breakthroughs in what we think is possible when it comes to understanding models and actually being able to steer their behavior as well. And I think the end vision is that no one will be able to build or deploy a super intelligent model without Goodfire's technology, um, whatever form that looks like, whether it's a developer platform or we become super embedded with the scaling lab training teams. I'm not quite sure what exactly the shape looks like, but that's the ultimate goal. And yeah, we want to align super powerful AI. It's why we all are so excited about the work that we do every day. And we also think that, what we do today is nowhere near where we should be when it comes to building and training models.
Yeah. If what would you say to someone who is, a passive consumer of all the AI news and, maybe is a little bit interested but not too sure how this could affect them? Why
Mm.
should they care about AI interpretability?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think there is definitely the angle of safety, and if you think about a world in which AI agents are out there doing our jobs or being doing sophisticated tasks at scale, and then you think about, oh, but we don't understand what they do or what hidden objectives they've actually encoded, then it's very easy for anyone to make the conclusion like, oh, we there's a huge gap here in safe deployment of AI, right? Because they could have these hidden objectives, they could have all these unintended side effects, and when you have AI agents in mass out there autonomously functioning, that's a really scary thing, right? So that's like one reason a lot of people get into interpretability and understand how it has a huge role to play in a safe future of AI. Um, my other my other thought here was that Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic, recently released an essay that I think was like really quite accessible and well written to explain why interpretability is one of the most urgent and important problems that you could be working on. It's called The Urgency of Interpretability. I really recommend it to anyone who's interested in AI. Um, and I think he just like outlines very clearly a lot of these concerns that I mentioned, and why also we are super optimistic that if you have more people working on this problem, smart people and more resources and capital allocated to this problem, that we can actually meaningfully make progress and kind of beat the capabilities race a little bit, to make sure models don't just get so much smarter without us understanding them.
Yeah. A little bit of a personal question because I think a lot of my Stanford sort of classmates would kill me if I didn't ask, what is the one thing that surprised you about the founding journey, that no book or no lecture or no one could have prepped you for? And then on the other side of it, if you were back in like your first year, second year in MBA, what advice would you give yourself in terms of how to think about what impact in the world means?
Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, what is one thing that Stanford didn't teach me? Um, I mean, I think a lot of being on a team this early is maybe so a lot of the side effects of being on a team this early are quite understated in that it really takes over your whole life. Whether you like that or not, I think, founders often say they try to carve out time for their families and for their hobbies and for all of those things. But when you commit to a company this early, it's very hard to not also commit to making it your whole life. And by
Yeah,
that, I mean, you think about it all the time. You see everything through the lens of like, how does this help my company? What does this mean for the company?
yeah,
Um, which is really like, I mean, it's not optimal in a lot of ways because it can be exhausting and tiring, but it is also like a huge privilege, I think, to care so much about what you're building, and to really enjoy being immersed in it all the time. But I will say, like, that is one thing that I think people should know when they start and commit to their journey, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I think it's different for everyone. When I was at GSB, I had friends who just wanted to build really successful companies, but they didn't care really what area it was in. They didn't really care whether it was about like some problem that they found super interesting or not. They just wanted to scale the business. And I think for me, it was really hard to think about spending 5, 10 years thinking about a problem that I didn't really care about all the time. Um, and so that's, again, another reason I came back to interpretability because it was like, I'm already thinking about this problem all the time. I might as well think about it within the context of an organization that I'm really excited to build and people that I really want to work with on this problem. So
Yeah.
um, that's one thing. And then if I were to talk to myself in MBA 1 year
Oh,
about
MBA
my
2 year.
about my impact.
Just what now impact means for you, and how
Hmm.
that might have been different from when you were in school and, making
Yeah,
different decisions.
I think a lot of I think it's interesting because we work on where I'm at a company that has such like huge kind of scale, long timeline considerations for shaping the future of AI. And of course that's like a really important, impactful thing to be working on. But also a lot of it is in the day-to-day details of building a team that you love, like making the people around you feel happy and supported and able to do their best work. Like, I think that that has huge exponential impact if you can build a culture that's positive and supportive and safe and all of those things. Then you can make people do their best work, and that passes on to the people they work with. And, hopefully all nets out to us doing really great work.
Yeah.
And feeling, really like committed to this mission together. And I don't think I really thought about things as much at that micro level when I was in MBA 1 or MBA 2. I was like, what market should I go into? Like,
Yeah.
which technology should I work on? What's the TAM? Like all these things that, we
Yeah.
were taught to like optimize for. Who are the investors? What's their latest funding round? All of these things. A huge part is just like, do you like the people you work with? Are you the best version of yourself around them?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's one thing I would have told myself to think about a little more.
And then final question, what is your mental framework or hack for just keeping up to speed with everything that's happening in AI? I think there's so many changes all the time. So do you have,
Yeah,
favorite resources or favorite ways to just structure information for yourself?
yeah, it's a great question, and I don't have a super organized method. I think working at an AI company just means that everyone's talking about it all the time. So I do organically get um, a lot of information from just like casual conversations. I will say the one thing I have learned is that a lot of the discourse happens on X, and I, before joining Goodfire, did not have an X account, and I
Oh, wow.
purposefully tried to stay off of it because I just generally don't like spending time on social media, and in particular X. I think it's like can have a lot of
It's
toxic
just a lot of
content as
toxic
well.
things.
Um, but it is probably where I've gotten most of the information outside of my team and like people
Yeah,
I know, just because I think, releases for AI labs are often X optimized. So you see both the releases first, and then you also see all of the discourse, afterwards on what this means, what this means for other companies, what this means for the future of AI, et cetera, et cetera. And it's all there. So I would say that. And then there are a few podcasts that I used to listen to a little bit, but I would say nothing super great. So I'm really excited that you are putting this
yeah.
together.
No
Hopefully,
pressure.
yeah, hopefully there's more content out there that's accessible. From what I've seen, it seems like There's really like high level content like Hard Fork or the Ezra Klein Show or things like that, which are very much like high level, conceptual. How does this affect society? What does this mean for us day to day? And then there's like very technical podcasts like
Yeah.
Machine Learning Street Talk. Um, Dwarkesh is a little bit more for technical audience as well. And then, Sarah Guo and Elad Gil have a podcast too, No Priors, which is also leans much more technical.
Yeah.
But nothing really in between that I know of or recommend. So,
No,
yeah.
we'll try to pioneer that.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, Myra, for your time. This is an exceptional conversation, and I'm looking forward to how Goodfire will continue to evolve. This is one of the exciting companies for me, and I think many more people need to know about AI interpretability. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Hope. Really, really happy to be here. And